Welcome to the most explosive royal discussion you'll see this week. We're living through a crisis at the palace unlike anything we've witnessed in modern times. Following the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, with plans now being discussed to remove him from the line of succession, we're breaking down what this means for the future of the British monarchy. I'm bringing you insights from royal editors who are at the center of this story: Matt Wilkinson from The Sun, Russell Myers from the Daily Mirror and author of the new bombshell book about William and Catherine, and Bronwyn Coy, royal correspondent from News.com. This has been a hugely dramatic week, another historic week that will be remembered for generations. Before we dive into the Andrew crisis that's consuming the palace, we need to talk about Prince William. Just days after his uncle's arrest, William was at the BAFTAs when he made a comment that sent shockwaves through royal watchers. When asked about a movie he'd seen, he said, "I need to be in quite a calm state, and I'm not that at the moment." Now he was talking about Hamlet, the emotionally distressing film that's been nominated for awards, but the timing of that remark is incredibly telling. It's so accurate for what has been happening these last few days. Even in that specific context of discussing a movie, it reveals the state of mind at the palace right now. The royal family in real-time crisis. Think about this: it's been almost a week since we saw those Andrew arrested headlines, and royal commentators still can't quite believe it actually came to pass. This isn't something anyone truly expected to see. And here's what makes it even more extraordinary: the royal family was given no notice either. They're reacting in real time just like the rest of us. The King, William, Catherine, everyone at the palace found out when we did. So when William made that comment about not being in a calm state just a couple of days after the arrest, the weight of that statement becomes crystal clear. The King's response was swift but measured. He issued a statement saying, "Let me state clearly, the law must take its course. Meanwhile, my family and I will continue in our duty and service to you all." That phrase, "continue in our duty and service to you all," is absolutely critical. Because that's all they can do now. The royals have to be seen getting out there, keeping calm and carrying on, as the British saying goes. What else can they do? The crisis is very much at the palace, but they can't let that spill out into the public space in an uncontrolled way. There have been calls about whether the King should make a public address beyond the statement, but let's not forget, there has been an arrest but there are no charges yet. These are allegations, and there have been allegations, numerous ones for many, many years. So you can't get any firmer than the King saying the law must take its course. This will be a very long and drawn-out process. There's an awful lot of investigations ongoing at the moment. A knee-jerk reaction probably wouldn't serve anyone right now. William's early warning, the voice in the room. Here's something that hasn't gotten enough attention but is absolutely crucial to understanding where we are now. According to Russell Myers' new book about William and Catherine, before this crisis, before the arrest, before these latest calls to cut Andrew from the line of succession, it was William who was one of the strongest voices wanting to cut Andrew off completely. This goes back 6 years to after the BBC Newsnight interview that everybody knows about, the one that was so disastrous it became a cultural moment. It was William who was the loudest voice in the room saying that Andrew has to be banished from the family, both publicly and privately. William saw Andrew's association with the royal family as a stain, a poison that would spread if not contained. William thought Andrew should be outside of the picture before the rot set in. That's how it was described to sources close to the situation, and this tells you an awful lot about William's state of mind and the fact that he is not only trying to protect the family but also has one eye on the future. This all affects him and his family directly. Looking back now, 6 years later, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Or perhaps not. It could have all been so different if they'd listened to William then. Thursday morning, the arrest that shocked the world. Last Thursday, very early in the morning, photos emerged that will be seared into royal history forever. 8 vehicles drove into Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, where Andrew has been living temporarily. The palace was caught completely off guard. Royal editors were calling their contacts saying, "What on earth is going on here?" Sources at the palace genuinely didn't know. It later transpired that even the King didn't find out about this arrest until it happened. And this is part of the whole story from here on out. This goes to the very heart of the crisis the royal family is in. They need to be seen, they need the public to understand that this legal process now needs to play out in a way that doesn't look like Andrew is getting any special treatment at all. The royal family not getting advance notice is part of that. Andrew is being treated as a regular citizen who is under suspicion of wrongdoing, no preferential treatment. No royal protection from the law. It was an incredibly dramatic day because of that distinction. Over the years, bar some major flashpoints, the royal family has had a lot of control over the narrative. They can plan out their responses, coordinate messaging, manage the timing of announcements. But on Thursday, you got the sense it was completely uncharted waters. They were spinning out of any sort of reality they'd been used to. Seeing the King's statement, which came shortly after the arrest, was an extraordinary moment. Getting that news that Andrew had actually been arrested, then the King's statement right after, and then having to get on with the day. The Queen was out on engagements as well. It must have been extraordinary within the palace, wondering how to play this out from there. The King's statement, every word matters. Let's break down that statement more carefully because every word was chosen deliberately. Let me state clearly, that's emphatic language, leaving no room for misinterpretation. The law must take its course. This is the King publicly declaring that his brother will receive no protection, no interference, no royal privilege in legal proceedings. And then the crucial ending, meanwhile, my family and I will continue in our duty and service to you all. That final phrase packs enormous punch. Because that is all they can do now. This process is going to play out. It may be a very drawn-out one, but the royal family needs to continue going on and showing that they're fit for purpose. They need to demonstrate that there is transparency, that they are able to represent something meaningful for the British people. If they're not getting on with their job, then it spreads that poison, that rot that Andrew has created. The taxpayers are paying for this family. They need to be shown that the royals are out there earning their keep. The bit that really strikes you in the statement is that very short part. Let me state clearly, there has to be a distinction now, an absolute bright line between the royal family and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Andrew is a private citizen, he's got himself into this mess. Discussions are ongoing about who will pay for his legal fees, and the understanding is that he is responsible for them. But what are his finances actually like? Will the King be under pressure to facilitate any sort of legal bill that comes Andrew's way? That will be further criticism after the King has been putting Andrew up at properties. The royal family is in a bind at the moment, and these conversations will be carrying on at pace within the palace walls. This isn't just a scandal, it's a constitutional crisis. We use the word crisis quite a lot when discussing the royals. Every scandal gets labelled a crisis, but this time it's not hyperbole. This is a genuine constitutional crisis. You cannot underestimate what's going on here. It is very, very serious. The allegations are very, very serious. And we've only just scratched the surface. There are 10 police forces and agencies in the UK looking at various aspects of Andrew's conduct. This is just the beginning, not the end. In terms of the government's statement about removing Andrew from the line of succession, they've also said that won't take place until after the police investigation concludes. So you could be looking at this dragging out for many years. The royal family needs to try and work out a plan of what to say and do at the right times. And you very much get the sense, especially in the last few days, that the dam has burst, because we're seeing action now in so many ways. The first bit has been ripped off, and now there's momentum building. They're going to release documents related to Andrew's appointment as UK trade envoy. Conversations about him are happening now in Parliament, where that would not have occurred in previous generations. The language being used is so punchy, so direct, so unlike traditional parliamentary discourse about royals. MP Chris Bryant stood up in Parliament calling Andrew entitled and privileged. This goes against all convention of how members of the royal family would be discussed in previous eras. There are members of Parliament standing up and saying, right now is the line in the sand. We are going to rip off the band-aid and really delve into this. The documents, what might be revealed? God knows what could be unveiled in letters and memos. It could get pretty ugly. This has exposed the royal family in a way we've never seen before, and the problem is there just doesn't appear to be an end point. As we've discussed, there are all of these investigations going on simultaneously. There is now a legal process with Andrew being under investigation on at least one charge, at least one allegation that's reached arrest stage. And it's that feeling that these things are all, and bear with the word here, unprecedented. The way the royal family is being spoken about in relation to Andrew is unprecedented. And there's this sense that action is going in so many directions, and you just cannot see where this all ends at this point. That must be unbelievably stressful for the teams at the palace who are trying to manage multiple crises simultaneously. Not so calm, as William said, definitely not so calm. The disappearance of deference. There are two things happening here that should terrify the palace. First, MP Chris Bryant and others openly criticising Andrew in Parliament with language that would have been unthinkable even 5 years ago. There's vitriol coming out that we haven't seen directed at members of the royal family, working or disgraced or arrested in living memory. They could have said these things before. This has been going on for 16 years in various forms, but they didn't. It feels like there's a massive pylon being knocked down at the moment. There are no libel laws protecting Andrew in Parliament. MPs could have weighed in before but chose not to. And what that brings us to is the scariest thing, the probably most damaging development for the royal family, the disappearance of deference. If it's now acceptable to speak about Andrew in these terms, what comes next? The king. William, that must be the biggest fear for the palace. Because how do you put that genie back in the bottle once it's out? If this kind of criticism starts, if it becomes normalized to openly question and attack members of the royal family in Parliament and media without the traditional guardrails of deference and respect, where does it end? Where do the calls for transparency in different areas stop? So much of the monarchy exists on mystery, on the majesty of it, on a certain level of respectful distance. If that continues to erode, if the calls for transparency in any and every direction keep mounting, the fundamental nature of the monarchy changes. ANDIW's perspective, will this ever end? While the royal family waits for the police investigation to conclude, it's worth considering Andrew's perspective. Obviously, the sympathy for him is non-existent given the severity of allegations, but from a practical standpoint, will this ever end for him? Andrew is probably asking himself the same question. The government has said that at the end of the investigation, they will consider legislation to remove Andrew from the line of succession, where he sits at number 8. Some commentators think this is just politicking, a bit performative. Did it need to be said this week? It seems as though there's a scramble of what can we say next, how can he be punished? The picture that appeared on every single newspaper in the world, on every news site, of Andrew being arrested tells you a lot about the situation the royal family and Andrew find himself in. There's a calling for Andrew to be punished until the end of time. But we need perspective here. Let the police investigations take their course. There are several being assessed at the moment. It's up to the authorities and the royal family to handle this properly. And these things will take a lot of time. It's almost giving false hope to suggest it will happen overnight. The Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has come out and said it's not easy to move quickly on royal constitutional issues. The Australian perspective. Speaking of Australia, so many people have been asking about the Australian mood in this situation. Obviously, there's the temperature here in England, but what about the Commonwealth realms? The sentiment is very similar. A catastrophe would have to occur for Andrew to ever become king. Obviously, he's 8th in line, he's not going to become king under any conceivable circumstances. But every time there's a report about Andrew, it's mentioned that he's 8th in line to the throne. Just the principle of that infuriates people. That sentiment is very much present in Australia as it is in the UK. Anthony Albanese getting involved and saying Australia will not stand in the way of removing Andrew from succession, that's not a surprise. But is it completely necessary for that conversation to happen right this second, now that the arrest has just occurred and there's a legal process that needs to be followed? Maybe not. Andrew should absolutely be removed from the line of succession. There's no debate about that. He shouldn't be a councillor of state, even though the language had been adapted to say it would only be working royals. Just take him out of the picture entirely. But here's the thing, people don't understand the constitutional complexities. They will view inaction as the royal family not having an appetite to do it. So while the police investigation should absolutely take precedent for both the authorities and the royal family, the optics matter too. It does feel quite chaotic. There are all these stories about Andrew, about his entitled behavior, his treatment of staff, his bullying, his difficult personality. Obviously, these aren't criminal allegations, but they paint a broader picture of a man who has lived a life of entitlement. The entitlement question, a dangerous path. And that's bad for the royals, because once you start scratching the surface of privilege and entitlement with one royal, where does it stop? Of course, the King and the Prince of Wales live in palaces and castles. William and Catherine have moved to Adelaide Cottage, but the perception exists of wealth and privilege. They fly in helicopters, have money at their disposal. If you start really digging into the entitlement question with Andrew, there'll be more questions asked. Why don't they get trains? Why do they fly in helicopters? Why do they need so many residences? That's a pretty dangerous situation for the royal family. It's dangerous because if you examine the eighth in line to the throne and decide he shouldn't be there because he'll never become king, well, why have a ninth? Why have a 10th? Why have a 20th? You could salami-slice large elements of the royal family away. What would you be left with? Just the direct lines. That fundamentally changes what the monarchy is and how it functions. Polling 45% support for the monarchy. A recent poll shows support for the monarchy has fallen to 45% after everything that's happened with Andrew. Are we heading toward the end of the monarchy, or at least vast changes to how it operates? It's so hard to tell where this all ends. Because of that uncertainty, it's impossible to say where their popularity lands at the end of this process. With that said, it is a critical juncture for the royal family. It's a crisis like they've never seen before in modern times. But there is a way through it. It's not necessarily the end of the monarchy. People do separate Andrew from the rest of the royal family. When they see William and Catherine out on engagements, they're not thinking they're all cut from the same cloth. People don't have that perception. But it is a dangerous time for all the reasons we've mentioned. There's a general perception of lack of transparency in the royal family and things that were allowed to go on under palace roofs. The royal family exists on trust from the people. If there's any perception that they can't be trusted, that there are financial improprieties like the allegations about Andrew charging massages to taxpayers during his trade envoy days, it all builds into an extremely dangerous narrative. Whether the royal family survives depends on how they continue from this point onwards. ANDIW's grim new reality. Let's talk about Andrew's new life, or really his lack of one. He's under what amounts to house arrest at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate. There are reports that he's been stopped from horse riding, which is possibly the only activity he had left. He's been kicked out of Royal Lodge, his 30-room mansion. He hasn't got a job. There's absolutely no public sympathy for him. But to be stopped from riding, from being seen out in public, that speaks volumes about how the palace views him, even going around Windsor, waving to people from his car. The lack of introspection about how this has damaged the whole family has been Andrew's undoing. What comes next for him? He's only 66. What is he going to do with his days while this case drags on for potentially years? It'll be interesting to see not only the developments in the legal case, but what on earth he ends up doing with his time. Just quickly about that raid on his 66th birthday, was that deliberate from the police? Andrew has not had the greatest reputation with police officers and protection officers. There are constant allegations about his behavior towards staff, his bullying, his entitlement. There's no love lost with anybody who has worked with Andrew, that's for certain. If you look at what happened to Peter Mandelson this week as well, with his own arrest, police moving swiftly after rumors he might flee the country, perhaps something happened in the last few days that made authorities feel they had to move on Andrew. Arresting him on his birthday was probably just an unfortunate coincidence for him. Though from Andrew's perspective, it must have felt like one final humiliation. Harry and Meghan, the invisible fact. Let's briefly discuss Harry and Meghan, who have just traveled to Jordan for a 2-day trip. There's no need for them to get into this debate about Andrew. In the same way that William and Catherine did not release a separate statement after the Kings on the day of the arrest, even if Harry and Meghan were here as working royals in 2026, there would be no need for them to release a statement. This is now a very delicate situation as it unfolds legally. The King has made the palace's stance clear. Harry and Meghan have no ongoing relationship with Andrew that we know of. So there's no reason for them to weigh in. And if they did comment, they'd be putting their heads above the parapet and opening themselves to extra criticism. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't. If they take part in a broadcast interview with an American or local broadcaster, any journalist worth their salt will ask, "How do you feel about the crisis enveloping your family? Do you have an opinion on it?" If they don't say anything, they've been silent when family is in crisis. If they do say anything, they're involving themselves in a situation their own family and the palace are desperately trying to manage, while having no idea what will happen next. There's no love lost between Harry and Andrew anyway. They've never been close. Harry's mentioned that in Spare or in past interviews. Even back when Harry's book came out, before these latest Epstein file revelations, he wrote about Andrew's sex crimes allegations and used the word shameful. It was very clear even then that there's no closeness between them. Some people have asked, are Harry and Meghan vindicated in getting out, in getting away from this toxic family situation? Harry had his own reasons for leaving, formulated many years ago, certainly not necessarily in the whole Meghan era. He's always wanted a different path. It probably has nothing to do with Andrew specifically. Harry would probably be wise to keep his counsel on this matter, especially with police investigations ongoing. It's fascinating, this family dynamic. Absolutely fascinating. We are living in a truly unprecedented time. The King having to make a statement after his brother was arrested, assuring the public that the law will take its course, is an incredible historical moment. RUSSELLMYRS book, A Love Story at The Palace. Now let's bring some light into these proceedings by discussing Russell Meyer's new book. It's called William and Catherine, The Intimate Inside Story, and it came out this week at possibly the most dramatic time imaginable. Russell essentially disappeared for weeks pulling this book together, and the result is genuinely revealing. What stands out is that at the end of the day, despite William and Catherine being the future king and queen, despite all the royal protocol and public duty, this is fundamentally a love story. The book details how they got together at university, the early days of their relationship, how they worked together as partners. What did Russell learn most about William and Catherine in writing this book? First, he couldn't believe it had been 10 years since a joint biography had been published. That alone was significant. He went into it thinking he'd tell the inside story of what happened behind the scenes, how they experienced these huge flashpoints of recent years, Catherine's cancer diagnosis, the King's cancer, the Andrew situation, Harry and Meghan's departure, the Queen's death, and how all of that changed their view and vision for a modern monarchy. But it really did fall into the category of a love story. Russell went all the way back and charted from the moment they met, how that meeting changed and shaped both of their lives. Looking into their very different upbringings and seeing who they are as people today creates a really interesting narrative. In the past, there have been myths about the couple. One major one was that Catherine and her mother Carol somehow conspired to send her to university to snare the prince. This was even depicted in The Crown, which is why so many people think that's the actual narrative. The SDANDIWS truth. But here's what actually happened. According to Russell's research, Catherine had met another teenager when she was on her gap year with Raleigh International in Chile. She was thinking about changing universities. She wasn't necessarily sure if she wanted to go to Edinburgh because a lot of the old school set, the public school crowd, were going there. This teenager she met convinced her to think about St Andrews. That corrects the narrative of whether she was chasing the prince. There were certainly individuals who did change their course, who even changed their entire life plans to follow Prince William to St Andrews. But it definitely wasn't Catherine's. You can't blame people for shooting their shot trying to meet a prince. It was a really interesting period, going back through old coverage and interviews with young women who considered changing their university choice to try to meet William. But Catherine wasn't among them. Her decision was organic, based on wanting a different experience from the Edinburgh crowd. The decision-making dynamic. One thing that comes through clearly in the book is the difference in decision-making between William and Catherine. Throughout the various dramas they've faced, the Rose with Harry family conflicts, there's been a consistent pattern. William and Catherine approach problems in different ways. And surprisingly to many people, Catherine often emerges as the more strategic, measured thinker. What really surprised Russell in his research was how integral Catherine is to the institution. People think of her as one of the most famous people in the world, one of the most photographed, glamorous at all stages, whether visiting scouts or attending a state banquet. But speaking to people who have worked with them for years revealed how invested Catherine is in the process, in the vision of the monarchy. Not just their personal vision of becoming future king and queen, but she's genuinely interested in the future of the institution as a whole. She's very involved in strategy. And here's what's remarkable: how much William relies on her. Not just professionally, though they work together most days, but also personally and emotionally. There are certain flashpoints you can examine, whether it was their brief breakup, whether it was dealing with her cancer diagnosis and treatment, and you see this rock-solid couple. Everything is on their shoulders now with the crisis at the palace. Are they prepared for it? Do they know what their role is as the future of the royal family? The vision for the future. They definitely have a vision of what they want, though they've had to adapt it considerably. When you talk about a slimmed-down monarchy, the king absolutely thought his brother Andrew would be involved. He would have wanted Harry and Meghan to be part of it. The slimmed-down monarchy looks a little threadbare at the moment, with so few working royals. But William and Catherine do have clear thoughts on the big issues. It was fascinating to research and discover from people who were there at the time the differing views when the Harry and Meghan saga was unfolding. William was intensely saddened. He thought his brother would be there by his side, be a team player. But Catherine was able to take a step back and think more strategically. She recognized that the fractiousness of William and Harry's relationship wasn't created by Meghan arriving on the scene. The cracks started appearing in their adolescence and adulthood. Discussions about who would take military roles, who would focus on Africa in terms of charity work, these created tensions long before Meghan. Catherine was the one who said, "Let them leave. If they don't want to be here, you need to step away emotionally. There needs to be a nucleus of a team that's committed to the institution." That was fascinating to discover. This Fab Four concept should have been the center of the royal family, but it was really more of a media creation. There was excitement in the palace when Harry started dating Meghan. People who were there described genuine hope that this could work. The clash of styles. Catherine described Meghan as having a touch of California about her. They dressed differently, acted differently, approached royal duty differently. But there was excitement, especially for Harry finding someone. However, there was an obvious clash of styles. When it didn't work out, Catherine had the introspection to say, "This cannot take over the running of the royal family. We've got to have one eye on the future and our roles." If Harry and Meghan don't want to be here, then let them walk. We'll build something sustainable with the people who are committed. You get the sense that William and Catherine are so family-focused. William was born knowing from the age he could understand it that he was going to be king. Catherine married into that reality. There's been so much discussion about how William wants to reign as king. But is there acceptance of that destiny or enthusiasm for it? William does not want to become king earlier than he needs to. He said himself around the Queen's 90th birthday that he doesn't lie awake at night thinking about becoming king, because becoming king means a member of his family has passed away. But undoubtedly, he's serving an apprenticeship. He's learning from his father. He told journalist Eugene Libby, "I want to bring about change for good." But what does that mean for a modern monarchy? They have their way of doing things. They've made deliberate decisions about how to bring their children up. Their view is centered on this principle: if you get the family nucleus right, then everything else will fall into place. The heir and spare problem. The situation with the heir and the spare isn't just an issue for the British monarchy. It's a problem for monarchies all over the world. William went through it personally. He did not want his children to go through what he experienced as a child. One child with a predetermined destiny, the other child, the spare, just being allowed to get on with whatever they wanted. That created massive problems throughout William and Harry's adolescence and adulthood. Unfortunately, it led to the path of Harry leaving the family entirely. William and Catherine are deliberately raising George, Charlotte, and Louis differently. There isn't that stark heir and spare division that defined William and Harry's childhood. They're working to create a much stronger family unit where all three children feel valued and have purpose, regardless of their position in the succession. The Kate vs. Catherine debate. Where do we stand on the Great Kate debate? Viewers of royal coverage understandably have strong feelings about this. When royal commentators say Kate, they often get corrected, it's Catherine. But in the engagement interview, William himself introduced her as Kate. He called her Kate throughout their university years and into their marriage. It's been a palace decision, which you can understand from a PR perspective. Queen Kate might not have the same gravitas. Queen Catherine sounds appropriately regal. But it's a decision for her and the palace to make together. When people get very passionate about this subject on social media, perhaps we can all calm down a bit. While she's officially known as Catherine now, she was absolutely fine being known as Kate for many years. William called her Kate. Her friends called her Kate. The change to Catherine has been gradual and strategic. She will be Queen Catherine when that day comes, and the preparation for that branding has been underway for years. The most inappropriate name for a royal. This is a fun question from Russell's book Research. William joked about wanting to call his firstborn Rodney or Graham. What would be the most inappropriate name for a royal child? Right now, it's got to be Andrew. Imagine if they had another royal baby and called him Andrews. Absolutely not. It's a firm no. It's a hard pass on any future Andrews for probably the next 500 years or so. It's wild because we won't have any more Dukes of York for the foreseeable future. Maybe we won't have any Andrews at all. The name might go into the history books like Gary or Keith, names that just don't get used anymore. Rodney and Graham would have been very funny choices, admittedly. But Ernest and Augustus for William and Catherine's children, everyone agrees those are good solid royal names. They've chosen well. Strong traditional names with royal history. Who deserves the next honor? King Charles recently awarded the University of Edinburgh, where Princess Anne is Chancellor, a Queen Elizabeth Prize for higher and further education. But which member of the royal family should he honour next and why? With all the working royals out there doing tremendous work, it's got to be the Duchess of Edinburgh, Sophie. Can she get any more recognitions? There's a birthday connection. They're making this answer slightly biased, but genuinely it's the right answer. What will likely happen in the future is that the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh will be elevated in their roles because of the slimmed-down monarchy reality. There simply aren't enough working royals to go around. Sophie has been absolutely exemplary, taking on more and more without complaint, supporting the institution, and doing it all with grace and effectiveness. She deserves recognition for stepping up when the monarchy needed her most. Favoit Royal Films. Inspired by the BAFTAs, what's the favorite royal film? The King's Speech is genuinely excellent. It's a film that holds up even after multiple viewings. The portrayal of George VI overcoming his stammer with the help of Lionel Logg is both moving and historically significant. But there's also the Harry and Meghan Lifetime movie, a modern royal romance or something like that. It features the worst acting you've ever seen, but it's also somehow the best film you've probably ever seen. Worst acting wrapped in the best possible entertainment value. They weren't actually in it, obviously. It was actors playing a bumbling British prince and an American actress. It's terrible, but in the most entertaining way imaginable. The last 4 or 5 years have provided plenty of scripts that could be turned into amazing Hollywood movies and dramas. Even from the Newsnight interview alone, there were 2 films made, Scoop and another one. This current era will absolutely be immortalized in film. The Andrew crisis, the Harry and Meghan departure, the cancer diagnoses, the whole chaotic period will be analyzed and dramatized for decades to come. An unprecedented time. We'll try to calm down, though it's hard to imagine next week being any quieter than this one. The royal family is living through unprecedented times. The arrest of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, the King's statement that the law must take its course, William's admission that he's not in a calm state, the calls to remove Andrew from succession, the investigations by 10 police forces, the disappearance of deference in Parliament and media, the constitutional crisis that's unfolding in real time. Against this backdrop of chaos and crisis, there's also the story of William and Catherine, the future king and queen, who are navigating these treacherous waters while trying to raise their children normally, while dealing with Catherine's cancer recovery, while supporting the king through his own health challenges, while managing the fallout from Harry and Meghan's departure, and while trying to modernize and preserve an ancient institution simultaneously. Russell Meyer's book reveals the love story and partnership at the heart of the monarchy's future. How Catherine has evolved from that university student who wasn't sure about Edinburgh to an integral strategic voice in the institution. How William has grown from the grieving son who lost his mother to a man preparing to be king while protecting his own children from the same pressures. How together they're forging a new path that honors tradition while embracing necessary change. The monarchy is at a critical juncture. The Andrew crisis could be the scandal that fundamentally changes how the royal family operates, how they're perceived, how much transparency is demanded of them. Or they could weather this storm as they've weathered others, though this one feels different in its severity and in the lack of public sympathy for Andrew. Support for the monarchy at 45% is concerning. The disappearance of deference is alarming. The calls for transparency in every direction are mounting. But William and Catherine represent hope for the institution's future. If anyone can navigate these crises and emerge with the monarchy intact and relevant, it's them. Because at the heart of all the protocol and palaces and public duty, there's a genuine partnership, a love story, a couple who understands that if you get the family right, everything else has a chance of working out. That's all we have time for on this royal exclusive. This has been an extraordinarily busy show covering an extraordinarily dramatic week in royal history. Thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments below. What do you think about the Andrew crisis? Can the monarchy survive this? Are William and Catherine prepared for what's coming? And should Andrew be removed from the line of succession? Remember to subscribe for the latest royal news, because if this week has taught us anything, it's that the story is far from over. We're only at the beginning of what could be the most consequential period for the British monarchy since the abdication crisis of 1936. We'll see you next week, where presumably there will be even more dramatic developments to discuss. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and remember, we're all witnessing history unfold in real time.